Hi, this is CJ with CompRCC.com. In this video, I'm going to be installing a Panhard kit for the SCX10. This is an RC four-wheel drive product, and it had been out of stock. I had been hoping to get one earlier during this build process, but they were out of stock for a while on these. It is one of their specific products. It's not something that they just wholesale or retail out. And I've looked at a lot of different Panhard kits, and by far the RC four-wheel drive product looked like the best. For those of you who don't know what a Panhard is, suspension systems like this have either a 3 or a 4-link setup. Now you have the lower links, which basically put the axle where it needs to be in relationship to the chassis and give it a stroke that it can move up and down. It gives it a range of motion. The upper link, as you can see in this case, this kind of V-shaped bar, this is a 3-link, and back here we have a 4-link, 2 independent rods, whereas the V-shaped one rotates on the pivot at the bottom of the V. What those do is, aside from keeping the axle moving up and down within its stroke and range of motion, their primary purpose is to keep the axle from changing its angle, what would be a caster measurement on a normal car. And so a Panhard uses a single link to keep that relationship with the axle in relationship to the chassis. And then it uses a lateral diagonal link that will attach somewhere here on the axle and go upwards to a pivot point on the frame. And that allows the axle to move up and down, but keeps it from moving left and right on its own. Then the servo is mounted up and out of the way, and a longer link is used. Now, one would ask, why can't you just put the servo up here and put on a longer link with the existing suspension? You can, but you end up with more bump steer as a result, because the suspension is going to try to move a little bit, and also because of the angle, the geometry that you get out of that as the link approaches horizontal, it in effect lengthens in relationship to the suspension mount. Thus, as the suspension goes up, it pushes the suspension slightly out to the side in a mild arc. That's what a Panhard does. Now, this kit, as I mentioned, I think this is the best one out there, and that's for a lot of reasons. It's very well engineered. The servo is mounted vertically up against one frame rail. They provide all the brackets. This is a complete kit. Some Panhard kits just give you the mechanism to attach a pivot here and perhaps the other link, and they leave the servo mounting up to you. They may sell the servo mount separately. This gives you everything you need all in one package. And it also is the most aesthetically pleasing. Some Panhards have large aluminum brackets that arch over the axle. It takes away from the look of realism that you're going for in the first place. That's one of the main reasons to use a Panhard with an Axial SCX10 or any other RC off-road, is to get the servo off of the axle, so that when you're looking at the car from the front, you don't have this big servo sitting here with a control horn. That is a dead giveaway. Oh, that's not real. That's an RC car. Of course it is. When the servo is up here out of the way and you have one discrete link going up this way and another discrete link coming to the servo, it becomes easier to suspend your disbelief that this is not, in fact, a radio-controlled car. So if you're going for a scale look, a Panhard kit is definitely the way to go. So I have removed the battery mounting system that I had up in the front here. This is something that many of you are used to. Those of you who are not so new to RC, this is something you're going to have to get used to and acclimate with. Anytime you do some kind of aftermarket part, a lot of times you're going to have to do some other modification along with it. Some aftermarket parts are a straight out swap, like a metal gear in the transmission. You're not going to have to do any special modifications. In this case, with the servo now being mounted upright over here, I'll check the measurements, but I would say there's a 98% chance that I am not going to be able to use the stock Ford battery mount. So I will probably be putting the battery back here as a result of that. If you've watched some of my earlier videos on this kit, you know that I have considered using saddle packs, and that would be a single cell saddle on either side. And again, I would have to fabricate some type of mounting system here. Learning to fabricate things, learning to work around these kinds of little problems is what you learn to do. When you modify an existing kit, the engineers did not take into account third-party products, what might be built by someone else to modify their model. There are always going to be hurdles with projects like this. So anyway, let me go ahead and open up this package. I could just tear these little bags open, but little Ziplocs like this make excellent containers for other parts later on, leftover parts, if any, from this kit, or other leftovers from the Axial. So I'm definitely going to want to save these. And we have a whole bunch of hardware. And a bunch of RC four-wheel drive links. That looks like part of our frame and servo mount. Okay, so these are the main brackets. We've got 3 control rods and a bunch of little ball sockets and miscellaneous hardware. This bracket is going to go behind the diff hump, and that is going to give us our linkage both up to the frame, lateral linkage, and it's going to give us the linear linkage that is going to give us our third link to keep the axle properly oriented forward and backwards. This piece, I'm not 100% sure, and RC four-wheel drive does not provide any instructions with this kit. So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to go online and see if they have a downloadable PDF. Okay, they do not have any instructions on their website, but they do have a bunch of pictures, and when zoomed in to the web page, it's not too hard to figure out where all of this goes. This metal bracket is going to replace this bracket here that retains these mounting holes, either for the battery, if possible, at the very least for the receiver box. Okay, so that is going to mount back here. And that looks like it's not going to be a problem for bumper mount. May have to trim the bumper, the metal posts that slide in here for the bumper. The one on this side may need to be trimmed flush to clear the servo, but we'll see as it comes together. So, okay, to move forward, I need to basically take apart the front end. The suspension is now taken apart. Still have a few rails to take off the body, but I wanted to show you this, that this bracket just goes right over the hump. It's going to attach through the standard holes on either side of the pumpkin and bolt with the existing hole onto the axle over here. And there's the third link attachment point. So it's very discreet and it's very sturdy. It's a nice thick aluminum. It's been very well manufactured, clearanced, bent in places. It's done very well. Now, since I'm never going to take this off except for servicing, this is going to be a permanent fixture, and I'm not going to be mounting the servo on top here ever again. I'm going to go ahead and snip these off and then file them smooth in the interest of realism, so that the differential has a normal line without these unnatural posts sticking up that otherwise show it to be not real. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video again and break out the Dremel and take care of that. Okay, there we go. Posts are gone, ground down. I'm going to quickly touch this up with a little bit of fine sandpaper. It's nice to have the right tools. That took all of 2 minutes. Okay, there we go. Now, there is a hole on this side because this was the shorter side. It was designed to have the bolt potentially thread in a little here, but if you poke around in there with an X-Acto knife or the end of a thin wrench, you'll find that there is a bottom to that hole. That is not a hole directly into the transmission case, so I don't have to worry about plugging that right now. I may do that later, but there were a few other things I was thinking about doing with these axles, so I'm just going to start with this. So now I need to basically take off these 3 brackets here. Okay, everything is now disassembled. This piece is being replaced. You can see how I earlier clearanced this item. I trimmed this little angled piece off altogether on this side and ground it down on this side to provide clearance for the servo so the suspension could articulate properly. Even then, that servo was still having clearance issues. Now I'm going to be glad to have relocated it completely. This hardware is not going to be needed, at least for these items. These are all self-tapping, and all of these items are tapped, threaded aluminum. So these screws are going to be replaced by some better hardware. I'm going to go ahead and save these, of course, though, because I may need them at someplace else on the kit if I lose a screw. You are going to want to retain these 2 servo brackets. You will be using those with this bracket provided that holds the Panhard and mounts the servo to the frame rail. So those get saved. This is the Ford battery bracket that is also discarded. Your front bumper should be maintained, I am hoping, or I may have to make some modifications so that it will fit, because I do want to use a front bumper. I'm assuming that there isn't a problem with this. They don't show it in their photographs on the website, but I think the reason that they do not have this on their photographs is so that you can see where other parts are mounted. So I think that this is not going to be a problem. And these I'm not going to throw away because you never know when you need a little plastic bracket or something. Set those aside.